Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. This morning's panel is a tough act to follow, but we'll do our best. I think our panel is the logical next discussion about financing. I think we had a chance to hear from the porridge developers. Now we have before you a number of different financiers. Essentially, we will be discussing the role of various financing vehicles, how the role they play in infrastructure project development. We'll spend some time talking about the newer kind of vehicles like SPACs, DFI project development vehicles like Africa 50, IFC Infra Ventures, I hope. And we'll try to discuss how we can match funding across all phases of the project life cycle and spend some time on exits. I think we now open the discussion to the floor. Who will ask the first question? The first person gets a sweet from me. No takers? I'll up that chocolate. Guys, I guess you've done a very good job. Oh, okay, spoke too soon.
Thanks. My apologies, it's a lot more of a follow-up rather than a question. Mr. Munama mentioned the four funds that are available from the DBSA. I think you only went as far as three. I'm sorry if I missed the fourth one, but I remember you went through the 100 million euros, and there was 10 million for the, that is the SADC Secretariat, and you also mentioned the 200 million for the infrastructure projects for RSA. What's the fourth one?
Thank you. Yes, it's four. It's 100 million euros from the EU, which is the IPSA fund. We have the SADC fund, which is $10 million. Thirdly, you have the DBSA, which provides 200 million per annum. And then lastly, there is also a fund with AFD from France, which is about $12 million as well. Thanks.
I think we have no more questions. Either you did a very good job explaining or it was a very boring topic. Yes.
I want to challenge the proposition that we have enough project preparation facilities. You know, there have been studies, as noted before, that project preparation can go up to 12% of total cost. Plus, the usual structure of the available project preparation facilities is that they are fragmented. And there's not an integrated amount that goes for all the complex processes that you actually need to do from beginning to end. So, you know, I'm just curious as to, other people's view on the project development funding gap. And it eludes me, but I think in Africa, an estimate was given by the World Bank or the OECD as something like $1 trillion. And it was a huge number that came up. Where you guys see the value of DFI project preparation facilities, because many people think they're too hard to get to, too difficult, and not an answer. Thank you.
So who's going to take that? Okay, Alex first, and then I think Elliot will have something to say as well.
Yeah, thanks. I think there have been a lot of studies done of project preparation facilities, and that in itself, I think, is an interesting use of consulting and donor time. I think project preparation facilities shouldn't become, or development finance shouldn't become, or pre-financial close development finance shouldn't become a separate asset class, I think, as somebody talked about earlier on. And even the activity of project preparation facilities, I think the expression itself has such a wide variety of meanings, you know, from grant funding, pure grant funding, through to really quite commercial private equity style early stage capital that's being provided by governments across the spectrum of the development cycle. So I think in terms of is there enough, is it coordinated enough? I think from the earlier panel it struck me that to get that very early funding for projects, you need a variety of funding sources, and some of it will be grant funding. I think for the kind of return, say, a pure developer without a balance sheet is looking for, like Electra, from a development project, and they vary from sector to sector, from country to country. But to really keep that developer in business, there's got to be grant funding to subsidize the kind of level of return that they're going to need. And so most of our projects, they see a combination of different things. So maybe another way to look at it is what instruments are required to finance the development of projects in these kind of first-of-a-kind early-stage infrastructure environment. So I think there's a need for grant funding. I think there's a need for kind of repayable grants, and I think DBSA has kind of moved into that space, which I think makes a lot of sense. And then there's a need for loans, which is kind of more in terms of what we're doing. We're often investing in the form of convertible loans during the development period. So we're putting our money in, so we can get it back at financial close. If things go well, we still have an option to capture some of the upside by converting that investment instrument into equity and perhaps capturing a higher return at financial close, or even staying in with some of our investments. So I think you need, and then there's kind of a pure equity investment or sort of mezzanine instrument. And in terms of are there enough facilities, when I look at my own sort of organization, when I talk about my own organization, Infraco is part of the private infrastructure development group, and I see kind of 8 different facilities all providing different things, and so I think that's just one of the organizations out there is providing a very wide variety, providing guarantees, we're providing senior debt, we're providing grant funding. So I think the answer, it's a long way of saying, I think there's a lot of variety out there, and then you look at what the IFC is providing, you look at what are some of the European government development financing institutions like FMO and the Dutch government providing just on their own, the whole variety of things they're providing. I think that the variety is there. I think there's plenty of development finance available. I think getting it available quickly, and I think one of the things, if I was selling Infraco, I would say we have a board of 5 private sector individuals who take decisions very quickly, and they have a ready pot of capital. So you need short decision making. I'm sitting over there in the corner with the project developers we're working with in Zambia. And they're constantly, we need a quick decision. Can we move to the next phase? And in a larger institutional framework, I think that's a challenge. And where a lot of this development, early stage capital finance is coming, where it's getting blocked up is if it's a large institution with a heavy approval framework, then I think it starts to lose the benefit full stop. Because if it's taking 6 months to approve the next round, the next required tranche of funding, the institutions are holding up the development timetable. And maybe that sort of brings me on to a sort of like, people ask us quite often, and DFID, who are one of the largest shareholders in my company, quite often say, pretty much every year, they say, why can't you do more? Why can't you invest more this year? The funding is available, do more projects. What's going on, Alex? Wake up, do some more projects. And what's the answer? And luckily, I've now had to work out a good answer to them. And my answer is it's institutional capacity on the government side, and it's generally vested interests. I think somebody mentioned utilities may not want to have a private sector project in their patch. So it's vested interests, and that extends to corruption. So government side resourcing, vested interests, and corruption are what are slowing up the development timetable I see from our side. Because I maintain it's not us. We can take decisions quickly. We have enough capital. We're short of people. Getting the people do projects, not capital, is my other answer to DFID. You have to get the right people in to do these difficult jobs in first-of-a-kind projects in difficult countries. And I see developers flying every weekend for years. I've done it, and it's actually a really tough job. So I think having the variety of funding out there is important. Having the right people to administer that funding and manage it well is even more important. And then I think you've got to have some capacity, some support on the government side to make transactions happen. You can't do a transaction without a well-resourced, capable counterparty on the government side.
George, how about consolidating the project development funds that you're managing?
Sorry, with
Sorry, Elliot.
Elliot, you wanted. I can also respond. I'd also like to respond, if I may, before Elliot does. And I think it's important once again to emphasize the point that governments also need to do their work to get these projects to a feasible stage. Very often developers are trying to chase deals where, they're trying to negotiate a bilateral arrangement with the government, which most certainly does make sense, and then you need to have the right partners to help it go through. But we've got to distinguish between funds that are needed to help governments to get projects to sort of a feasible stage to take them to market, and then of course monies that are needed by developers to prepare, I suppose, submissions for these bids and to ultimately take them through to financial close. So the capacity on the government side very often is a challenge, both financially and in terms of people. So as Alex said, if you've got the right people to be able to I suppose, drive these projects to bring them to a feasible stage, things will happen. If you look at the renewable energy process in South Africa, we had a lot of champions driving the process here, which defined a program that investors could let into. And you had many sort of even fairly inexperienced developers coming to these projects to actually make them bankable. And of course, there's lots of willing money out there who's saying, well, if you've got the right project, we'll come and partner you. So, once again, I think there is money for the right project. Elliot.
No, thanks, George. I think my colleague Alex just answered some of the questions in terms of availability of products out there. From the DBSA perspective, we offer pure grant financing for project development. We also have repayable grant over the life of a project. We also have project development loans for some projects. We have interest rate subsidies for projects which are highly risky, for which commercial banks' interest rate may be high. We also have capital grants where the project cannot handle debt of a particular amount. Now, it will be interesting to know what other product a development financing institution should offer to enable project development other than those which I have provided. And the second part of your question was the fact that project preparation facilities are not integrated. Yes, most of them, of course, they are set up for different purposes, and it's understandable. But there is a difference between a project preparation facility and a project preparation facility that is run by a DFI. And the difference is one, and that is the one run by a DFI develops a project with an intention to reach financial close. Our scorecard is the value of projects developed. It's not the amount of money you spent.
Nancy, that's good enough?
Yeah, that's right. I want to see the scorecard. That should be part of the standards to disseminate.
Okay. One more question.
I have questions for George. I think you mentioned that there were some infrastructure debt issuances that were starting to attract pension investors, right? And could you just mention a few landmark bond issuances in South Africa where you saw appetite from domestic or foreign pension or insurance investors?
I wouldn't say that there's a few. There most certainly is interest for institutional investors to lend to projects as opposed to project bond structures. They've lent directly to projects, and we've seen Sanlam, Future Growth. A lot of these institutional investors have actually come to market to co-finance projects with commercial banks. We were involved in a wind project financing in Kenya where we had the Danish pension fund, funnily enough, that was actually interested to lend to this wind farm in Kenya. Of course, it was with some credit enhancement, but it shows you that there is appetite. The question is whether it actually makes sense and whether it's cost efficient relative to what's actually available. And in SA, as I mentioned, there isn't that much of a difference between where institutional investors are pricing themselves currently and potentially then bond solutions relative to where commercial banks are pricing currently.
Thank you. I think that wraps it up. You've been a fantastic panel. Thank you, and a great audience. Thank you once again.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.